Já.
Ty?
My. Spolu. Protože každý má mít možnost se svobodně rozhodovat o svém životě.
Jak je v Londýně, Jeníku?
Radio Wave. Děláme vlny.
Nestihli jste zajít na filmy, které jste chtěli vidět? Nejúspěšnější filmy z letošního festivalu Jeden svět najdete od května zdarma a legálně na Promítej i ty. promítejity.cz. Promítat filmy nikdy nebylo tak snadné.
Jeden svět. Festival dokumentárních filmů o lidských právech. Pořádá společnost Člověk v tísni.
So I just wanted to ask you, how many electronic devices do you have, like phones, computer?
Oh my god. Definitely more than 10.
iPad, phone, PlayStation, and I have a little tablet.
I'm pretty close with my phone. It doesn't really leave my hand very much.
My iPhone is the most critical device I have.
Do you love that phone a lot?
I'm pretty attached to it, yes. I'd be lost without it, probably.
I'm also attached to my phone, my computer, my tablet. And it amazes me how, in just 20 years, they've completely changed the way I live and communicate. Our devices are sleek and elegant. We store our lives in a beautiful cloud. I started making this film to explore the impact of our digital revolution. And then, secrets the industry tried to hide for years began to spill out. electronics are made and unmade is dirty and dangerous. It's a global story of damaged lives, environmental destruction, and devices that are designed to die.
In China, massive industrialization have put huge pressure on our ecosystem and on the environment. When it comes to IT industry, many people think it's green or naturally it's green, or some people think it's virtual. But in our investigation, we found it's not like that. This pollution is having all kinds of different consequences, but I think that the top impact, the biggest impact is on this public health. We have nearly 300 million rural residents who don't have access to sufficient safe drinking water.
我们说啊，但报告写的他不相信，因为他没看到。这看到就相信了，我们就相信。我们前头我就对那个害的常规要他禁止停了，或者说害人。这是害的子孙后代不以后，我们这一代人害了以后，下一代人就把他们害了。
I keep thinking about the moment when I face all this environmental and social damage on that river, which carries all this waste to the lake beside the Yangtze River. And these old ladies suddenly knelt down on their knees in front of me. I don't have any sort of government administrative power, don't have much financial resources to deal with this. But I told myself at that moment, in front of those ladies, I told myself that at least I need to bring the message out. I need to make sure that all the users of all these gadgets, they need to be informed about this.
This is what this valley used to look like. Just full of, this was the richest agricultural valley in the country. You can see why people, once they saw this, wanted to live here. I moved to this area in 1969 to go to law school because I wanted to help people who didn't have the means to represent themselves. It was a time when most people had not heard of the semiconductor industry. But within a few years, people started seeing the birth of what has become the global electronics industry. Top names were companies Hewlett-Packard, Apple, Intel, Advanced Micro Devices. Virtually the who's who of the electronics industry. And of course, the granddaddy of them all was IBM.
I was the first microprocessor buyer for IBM. In the early 80s, the idea of a personal computer, which was an oxymoron, right? I mean, personal computer, what would you use it for anyway? But it got legs. I mean, we started the PC business, the first year they shipped 50,000 units. And so we went from 1,000 a week to 40,000 a week. And at that point, the PC was launched.
From almost the very beginning, you heard electronics and semiconductor production was a clean industry. They said it was as clean as a hospital. But what they weren't telling people was that it was really a chemical handling industry, and that the magic of making these microcircuits relied on the use of hundreds, if not thousands, of very toxic chemicals. And that's why they have clean rooms. That's why they have bunny suits to try to protect the chips. It was never designed to protect the workers. It was always designed to protect the product itself. What happened was people started getting sick with very strange kinds of illnesses, things that didn't seem to make a lot of sense and didn't seem to hang together. But increasingly, as this happened more and more, there was a small group of people that began to think that maybe this was related to the chemical exposure on the job.
Want to put music on?
Yeah.
All right, go on. Turn on the music for Mom. Put some good music on today. Right there? All right, I'm gonna sing.
Yeah.
Okay, go. In 1975, I was 18 years old, and I started working in the electronics field. I went to Spectre Physics, and they just hired me just like that. I was making the end of the laser, and I would have to mix up this chemical, and I used to call it green gunk, and get the consistency, and then put it into a spray gun, and I would have to heat that up after I glued it on together. That was just all day that I did that.
Yvette didn't know the material she was using turns out to be probably in the vicinity of 50% lead oxide. She didn't know she was exposed to lead. They didn't tell her that.
I got pregnant with Mark in 1979, and that was full term, 9 months, and we were just really happy about it. Okay, good man. Hey, that was he doesn't even know to cross the street and not know a car is coming to stop. Two hands. Going to the restroom, you know, I have to go with him in there. So I have to assist him with everything. Who's number one?
Marcus.
You better know it, huh? No. If I knew what I know now, I would have ran out of Spectre Physics at the time. It was unnecessary. It breaks my heart that I could have avoided this. There you go.
We are filing a lawsuit against her employer. And it's a lawsuit for her son, who was born with severe developmental disabilities. And it's a suit for concealment of systemic chemical poisoning in the case of Yvette, and for the direct injuries to Mark.
Mark's condition isn't like a cold, take antibiotics and you're going to be fine in 5 days. This is lifelong. Your love just overrides all that. And you do what you got to do. To this day, I still do that. I'm sorry, getting a little emotional.
We've known about the bad effects of lead, including reproductive effects, since the era of the Romans. There was an OSHA standard in place requiring hazard communication and medical removal. Didn't do any of those things. Do I think this was preventable? Oh, yeah, I do. I discovered IBM had a corporate mortality file, which they kept for 30 years. And it kept track of the causes of death of their employees.
The most dramatic findings were about cancer. For the company as a whole, this was 33,000 deaths that were in this corporate mortality file, so it included people who had worked all over the US. But then when you look at specific plants, like the IBM plant in San Jose, there was some extraordinary excess causes of death. One was brain cancer, another was non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, another was melanoma of the skin, and in the women, breast cancer was 3- and 4-fold higher than expected. That was the heart in this San Jose lawsuit.
In a Santa Clara courtroom today, the first trial out of more than 200 similar lawsuits filed against IBM. Former IBM workers Jim Moore and Elida Hernandez say they developed cancer from exposure to toxic chemicals at IBM's San Jose facility in the late 70s to early 90s.
IBM literally tried to prevent the results of the mortality analysis from ever seeing the light of day. In fact, they went to the judge and said, this can't be used in this case. Elida Hernandez is not dead. She's going to be in the courtroom. And not only was it not relevant, the judge said it might prejudice the jury if they saw what these excess causes of death were. And so he denied use of it in the court.
Many of the brands will respond to questions by saying, no one has ever proved to me that a single person has died from exposure to these chemicals, either inside our factories or outside of their factories. End of discussion. But that's not the way that we approach environmental or occupational health in the world. We are not flying blind here at all, especially on the chemicals at issue here in the electronics industry. Actually, on most of the common chemical used in all industrial manufacturing, we've been at this work for 40 years.
If you look at the publicity generated by IBM, you would think that we lost everything. And that's simply not correct. After the trial, IBM matters were resolved for hundreds of people whose claims did not go to trial.
What can you tell us about the settlements?
I'm not going to be able to talk about any of the resolutions of the cases, and I won't.
This whole area was a contaminated site. It still is. And there were many companies in here, that all of whom created this toxic nightmare here in Silicon Valley. Chip companies and the other electronics production companies used hundreds, if not thousands, of toxic chemicals. And most of the chemicals, once they're used in making the components, needed to be disposed of as waste. The companies ended up storing them in underground storage tanks all over the valley. But what the brilliant people who were designing these systems didn't quite think through all the way was that the solvents were really good at dissolving things. And so when you put them into a tank, eventually they're going to eat their way through the tank.
Solvents that the electronics industry used in production in Silicon Valley in the 70s and 80s are now in the groundwater. And if you think about putting a drop of ink in a bathtub, that spreads really quickly, and it's really hard to get that drop of ink back. That's what we're dealing with, except we're dealing with multiples of gallons of this stuff that is in the groundwater.
In late 1981, there were over 100 families in one little neighborhood who had serious problems. And the state health department discovered that the families that were drinking the most heavily contaminated water had significantly higher rates of miscarriages and birth defects than did people in other neighborhoods.
The traditional approach to toxicology is that the more stuff you're exposed to, the more harm it causes you. But what we're seeing particularly around cancer and around hormone-disrupting chemicals, is that it's when you're exposed to it, the time of exposure. So if you're in third trimester and you get even a part per billion or part per trillion exposure, it can actually cause significant damage.
We formed the Silicon Valley Toxics Coalition, and we did a summer organizing project, getting people to sign petitions asking the EPA step in with their authority under their Superfund program.
No CSP! No CSP!
And I went to a meeting in Washington and presented these thousands of petitions saying, we need EPA to come in. It's time for EPA to exercise your authority. And to everybody's great surprise, they agreed to do that. So Hewlett-Packard became a Superfund site. Intel became a Superfund site. National Semiconductor, Advanced Micro Devices, IBM, you name it, they were there, and they were all Superfund sites. cost of cleanup for IBM as well as all the other companies has been tremendous. It's an enormously slow and tedious process. And those same chemicals that are still right under where we're standing are now beginning to seep back up out of the groundwater through the soil and are actually coming into the offices of these software engineers at Google. And this is the one that EPA said might take 300 years to clean up. This is so complicated, the devastation is so enormous that we're really talking centuries of cleanup, not just years or decades. Every time we've been able to identify a problem, companies have made the argument that we've had problems in the past, but we've learned from those and now where everything's fine. The problem is that it just keeps reoccurring. When companies started moving away from Silicon Valley to China, I think that they've been only too happy to have the government off their back.
The Chinese government made an offer to multinational corporations that they couldn't refuse.
You need land, and you need money, and you need government approval, and you need lots of people to put it all together. Well, they have all of that in China.
Don't sleep, don't speak, keep your thoughts pure and neat, keep it simple. You know, I really wish you could just give your cluttered mind a rest. God's feed to the millions of fishes and such a special hill. I've seen that there's always some black hawk there who tries to zombie. Just when you've tricked your mind to forget to remember, somebody comes up.
And we are calling it iPhone. Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone.
If you look at the launch of the Apple V, they were making 10 million in 1 week. So, I mean, how do you wrap your head around these numbers?
One of the primary purposes of outsourcing is to enable companies like Apple to make what are essentially unreasonable demands on manufacturers that they wouldn't and couldn't make if they actually had to employ the workers directly. Apple doesn't have to worry about what it means to workers when they insist on a tripling of the pace of iPhone production.
整个电子行业的工人像是都是这些工人呢，他们的那种学历都是初中到高中。然后呢，另外一方面是这样的，是穷困贫困，然后你要出去工作之后，你还要加班，拼命加班才可以存得到一点积蓄，要不然的话，你连维持你的生活都不可能。
的话就是帮那个苹果加工一些塑胶件，充电器啊，还有苹果耳塞，还有 HTC 那种，就是会打印机那种。他每天都要求那个达成率跟良率，他控制得很严嘛。
这个流水线是非常的长，而且它的速度要很快。 但是他每个工人他都有一个很细的一个步骤，就是说，如果你稍微一慢下来的话，你就会对整个这个流水线就会产生影响，你不能够走人的。
像我5月份呢，有31天的话，就上了30天班，就刚好休了1天。是上夜班的时候，凌晨就是刚好是4点多钟。 就精神状态不是很好了嘛，那个机械手 就跑出来的时候，就碰到了背上，就去沙井医院。第二天我就打电话给我们老大，就是说可不可以报工伤，我都上不了班了。他说报不了，现在。
那时候你在土上工作的时候，大多数人你觉得他们高兴吗？
反正每天都是工作，工作完了都很累呀。反正一天12个小时，挺累的。
有休息吗？
几乎没有休息。
一周工作几天
？7天吧。
见到他，他还是一直在昏迷的状态，就是好像每天下午只能进去20分钟去看看，因为他在这个重症监护室里 ICU 里。
然后你跟那个厂里面交涉，他们怎么说呢？
人家就说是出于人道主义。给你治疗给你一点这个人道补偿吧，那真是无法形容，真是让人揪心。算了，不说了，说出来不好。
今天回过头来看这些事情，你对富士康有什么看法？什么给你评价？
我没想过这件事。
听你对将来有什么想法吗？
没什么想法。
打脚！
今天晚上发生在成都富士康车间的爆炸，最新的消息是2人死亡，16人。
Workers died and 15 others were injured after an explosion at a Foxconn factory in Chengdu, southwest China.
事故的地点是工厂区3楼，生产平板电脑、铝制材料后背的打磨生产。
The accident occurred at around 7 p.m. in a polishing workshop and appears to have been triggered by an explosion of combustible dust in a duct.
No one should be surprised that aluminum dust, if it's in a high enough concentration and there is an ignition source, it will produce explosion and fire. This is a hazard which is extremely well known. So the fact that Apple suppliers had an explosion in Chengdu in the plant means that they had very poor housekeeping, very poor production processes. That's terrible. What's completely unacceptable is that 5 months later,
At another plant, but within the Apple supply chain, they had another explosion and fire. It's outrageously inexcusable that they had a second one 5 months later. They've set up these supply chains exactly the way they want them. They monitor these supply chains with exacting scrutiny, so they know exactly what's going into their products at every point along the way.
I find it really hard to believe for any of those companies to say they don't know where some of their stuff comes from. I find it really hard to believe, right? Because they do. Now, they may not want to admit it publicly, fine, you don't have to, but they should know where it comes from. Any good supply chain practitioner knows that.
How often do you upgrade, your phone?
Every couple of years.
Do you upgrade often?
When I have the money to, yeah.
换新手机半年吧，差不多。
So you upgrade pretty often, or?
Yes, you have to. Yeah, you have to.
Well, we have a teardown all night fix-it of the gun, so it'll show you how to disassemble the whole thing. Yeah, absolutely. So I have an iPhone 5 here, and I'm going to show you a little bit about what's inside, what makes it tick, and some of the design choices that Apple made putting it together. So the first thing Apple has on the bottom is 2 proprietary pentalobe screws. This is a security screw that Apple designed to keep people out of the phone. This isn't really a phone, it's pretty much a full-blown computer. To make your phone last for 8 hours, you need a really big battery. Batteries in phones last about 400 charges. Every cell phone I've ever had, you just pop the back off, you could pull the battery out, swap a new battery in. Every year or two, you'd have to replace the battery. Apple has decided with the iPod and now the iPhone that they don't like that model. So what they are doing is building the batteries into the phone and using proprietary screws on there in an attempt to limit the lifespan of the phone to about 18 months, which is around the time when they have a new phone and they want you to buy a new one anyway.
iFix is a company that wants to see everything get fixed, so we show people how to fix things and provide the parts, tools, and guides to enable them to do so.
Helping everyone fix everything. So that's the challenge. It's a big challenge because there's millions of devices out there.
I'd say Luke and I are reluctant capitalists. We get excited selling screwdrivers, even though that seems like a boring product, because we're selling people a capability where they're able to do something that they wouldn't have otherwise. We want to make it simple and easy for people to repair their own stuff.
So here's an example of a circuit board in this e-waste bin. This is out of a Apple laptop from a few years ago. Even if you make this circuit board in the most environmentally friendly way, it's still going to use a ton of water, probably literally a ton of water, lots and lots of materials.
The electronics industry is closed in ways that traditional American manufacturers aren't. They're selling you a thing and they're saying, well, you have it, but you don't really own it. There's no way we're ever going to sell you a screwdriver to be able to get onto the phone. Ford would never sell you a car and say, we're not going to make tires available to keep your car running after 30,000 miles. You have an entire ecosystem, an entire industry that's built on secrecy. And we're one organization that's trying to pry open the hood a little bit, show people what's inside.
When we originally started iFix, it was just a way to provide people with some solution to fix broken devices. And over time, we've realized both the manufacturing and the environmental problems are a huge concern. Over the last few years, I've been to China on a pretty regular basis, a lot of that related to our tool manufacturing. We're looking at getting some circuit boards manufactured. This is the big rechargeable battery, and then this is the main circuit board in here. So considering it's just a flashlight, you can see it's a surprisingly complex circuit board.
Nice to meet you. For inspection, photo inspection.
Visiting factories, we've found that it's surprisingly effective to show up on short notice. In general, any factory that's not willing to let you see the factory is an immediate red flag, and at least for us, someone that we don't want to do business with. This is the big line in the factory, so this is where they're etching and bringing all these nasty acids and other chemicals in. You've got a little bit of acid leak here. You can see congealed acid on the outside of the machine. I walked over to where there were some storage tanks, and there was basically acid all over the floor. And the moment I looked over that, they told me immediately, get back away from here. And this isn't giving me a good feeling. As far as making sure everything's done correctly environmentally, it doesn't seem like that's a priority for them. And then about the Maoju River, and he said that the fact that it was so dirty was the price you had to pay for the last 30 years of development.
Yes.
So yeah, don't want to buy from them.
我就在污水站里上班的。环保来了以后，我排放口里面打点自来水，放到里面，我打走去化验，就这样的。很多工厂有存在这个问题。
你说把自来水放到瓶子里，
就是这么回事。这个现象基本上现在都占到40%-50%了。但是我了解，我在这个毛州河工业区啊，还有那个江边那边那个工业区，它这个水呢，全部都流到这个河道里面，全部让起来了。但是你老板罚款，你老板也有刑事责任的。但是你这个，如果我们处理员工，就是最低3年至5年徒刑。就是这个事情我很害怕的。我们话要说明白这个道理，因为风险很大。
This is definitely the most professional of the factories visited. The fact that we're being taken through this water treatment facility is a really promising sign. You start out with incredibly yucky water, and it goes through a progressive series of filters and other processes, and eventually you end up with hopefully acceptably clean water. The coolest thing, when the water is come through the treatment facility, some of the water comes out and dumps into this fountain. And they have fish in here, and the factory owner said, well, they know the water treatment's working okay as long as the fish are still alive. A little unfortunate for the fish, because if something breaks, maybe the fish die.
So the factory general manager specifically said to me that lots of the Chinese customers they have don't like the fact that they've spent all the money to do the water treatment because it adds to the cost of the boards.
But it's clear to me that this would definitely be the factory to buy from of the ones we visited. You see here with all these factories just the impact of all our manufacturing and buying, like when we were looking at the river yesterday. All the stuff we're going and buying at the store is messing up water and rivers over here in Shenzhen.
Exactly.
But an American, we never see that river. We think we've fixed all of our
environmental problems with water quality and such because we don't see it. So it's kind of out of sight, out of mind.
This is the 2015 Skoll Awards for Social Entrepreneurship. From the Institute of Public and Environmental Affairs, Ma Jun.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm truly honored and humbled to be the first Chinese citizen to receive the Skoll Award. Thank you.
I set up this Institute of Public and Environmental Affairs, or IPE, and our first project is to build a national water pollution database. So all these records comes from the government sources. The public can access the information by clicking on the locations on the map, because people want to know, who should be held responsible for such a bad water pollution situation. And so far, we got some more than 110,000 records of violations in our database. Environmental litigation is still quite difficult in China. As a result, the cost of violation is very low. It's actually lower than the cost of compliance. So all these factories in China, many of them would rather pay fines year after year without really addressing the problems. In April 2010, we filed letters to 29 IT brands to check with them whether those polluting factories, whether they are their suppliers. All of them responded except one, that is Apple. Apple just gave us one statement, that is, we have a long-term policy not to disclose our supply chain. That's it.
And we call it the iPad.
I was quite shocked. I can't accept that because, I think that you could have your own culture, you could make your own policy, but when your operation is having an impact on the health of other people, you can't say that I've made a policy not to talk.
Ma Jun contacted me, and we began to work together to apply additional pressure to a company with headquarters here in the United States. Ma Jun singled out a number of facilities that he believed were in Apple's supply chain that had had a very heavy environmental impact in their locality. And when he leveled those charges, Apple was shocked and sort of in denial that this type of problem, to this extent, could really exist in their supply chain.
I think it's important to understand that this is not just about Apple. This is about the IT industry.
Despite their audit protocols, there's a lot more talk than walk on environmental impacts in the supply chain. You say to yourself, how could they not know about any of these problems? But it's all what you ask and it's all what you look for. So if you're there and you have a checklist of what you need and you need it now, and that checklist does not include what's going on at the end of the pipe of your wastewater treatment plant, it's actually conceivable that you know exactly where it's being made. You just don't know exactly how it's being made and what the impact is. That's what's going on, not just with Apple, but with all of these companies. 40 years of operating the Environmental Protection Agency in this country, these are American-based companies. Hard to believe.
The battle is far from being over. This industry is still, consuming too much resources. we still have this industry which is discharging so much waste, not just normal waste, hazardous waste. In just one supplier, it generates more than 100,000 tons of hazardous waste in 1 year. How could we dispose them, in a safe way? So how much a time bomb this industry is gonna create?
In electronics at this moment of time, I believe we're in the dinosaur age. We're using too many resources, too many raw materials, and the life of a computer is typically 3 to 4 years.
We're a small company in Ireland, and our mission is to produce a fair trade computer. In the early days, I repaired the component levels on the computers, on the motherboards. From that, I noticed that there was a huge amount of waste in the computer industry. So we started designing and building updatable, upgradable, reusable computers.
This is my father's environmental drill. No electricity, you just drill.
How could you build a computer without plastic? How could you build a computer without lead, mercury, PVCs, brominated flame retardants, and all the other heavy metals? That was our goal. The material we use is wood. So it's technology of 100 years ago, but it's perfectly good. Our computers will last 7 to 10 years because home users, non-technical people can repair and replace. I'm now replacing the memory. You can extend the life of it by upgradability. This year coming is a very big year for us. In March, we will be in CeBIT in Germany. It's probably the second largest fair in the world, electronic fair, and we will show our computers there.
The problem is the laptop, which is just a prototype stage. I'm trying to get a manufacturer that will produce it at a reasonable price.
Yeah. The volume is minimum 5,000 plus. That's the only way, once you're beyond 5,000, you now have a factory, you're running a factory.
Yeah. I think it's all about the message. We're doing all the right things. We're the only people doing it. We're leading by example. We're a small little company showing these things can be done.
Today is our major launch in Europe. We've lots of invites sent out to people.
Are you nervous?
Yes, always. We have a lot riding on this, so it's quite important that the launch is good and we can meet people and explain what we're doing.
We were awarded the world's first European eco-label for integrated desktop computers. It was the world's first to ever achieve this award. Now, at that time, I thought, wow, the gates will open, the orders will flood in, but that was not the case. Maybe a little bit of naivety on my part. It's hard out there, like government agencies and people like that. There is no room for environmental. They are totally just bottom line.
So we have a crowd. We have a crowd at our stand again, So, have you an interest in environmental? The laptop made from industrial waste. It's made from pallets. We're getting lots and lots of students and younger people, and they all had a huge interest.
Most of the people that have come to us are stating it. Why can we not repair them? Why can we not replace a battery? Why can we not replace a hard drive? Why does it only last for 3 years? Over again, I'm looking at it now, it's one little step at a time. So what we need to do is work harder, build more computers, and get people to join us.
What do you do with your old electronic devices that you don't use anymore? Like when you get a new iPhone?
At the moment, it's lying somewhere in a closet.
I believe it's in a drawer in my desk at home.
扔掉。如果没坏的话，就先放着呗。
Part of the reason why I still kept my old phone was I really didn't know what to do with it, and I had no idea what happens if I get rid of it.
The raw turntable, this I know works.
For the first 20 years that I was involved in electronics, the focus was on production. But as the industry grew and expanded, I realized, along with a number of other people, that it was not only the production-related hazards that were a problem, it was what happened to these products as they became obsolete. This industry has grown so rapidly that it's becoming much more of a resource, a suck. It is just taking up so many resources. We have to find ways of reusing our devices.
就看到CCTV 的一个电视节目，报道桂屿电子垃圾拆解的问题。因为就是我根本不相信，怎么会有人用这样的方法去拆解电子垃圾，造成如此严重的污染。我们就开了一个车，就几个人就到桂屿去。桂屿的孩子，他血中的这些血铅呐，还有个化学物质的浓度还是比对照组高。这来说，就说铅它没有一个安全值，就不管是在什么水平，只要它有铅的话，事实上它对人体都是有害的。
那过去真都是这个污染很大了的时候，做农民就反映啊，外面这田家里稻谷都整得把安静都受不了，稻，那就是上面就是来搞，就是要搞这个基因，这绩效排出去，排出去那我就没得搞的这个烟，就是厉害。
但你要通到底下，它不也
这个有烟根嘛，就通到底下，我烟子走烟沟出去。
那不也污染吗？啊，昨天放假了。
其实都是相互影响。那你空气，你这些海水，你是没有国界的，它是可以随便去流的，对吧？ 你这个鱼它也是到处去游的，那你这个污染了这些海水，污染了这些空气，那说不定哪天就又吹到其他国家去了。所以说实在的，都是会受到影响的。
We think, okay, we'll send our e-waste to China. Let them burn it, let them have the pollution. But we have to remember that air pollution travels around the globe. That pollution is getting lofted into the atmosphere and coming right back to us. Metal is a metal is a metal, you know, and there's no other form for it to convert to. You can convert it from being in the soil to being in the water to being in the air, but you still have a metal. In our work, we fly through clouds and we sample the cloud droplets and we measure their chemistry of each one very fast as you're flying through a cloud. They're flashing as fast as you can imagine on a screen, and we collect all that information. And what we get is what's a chemical fingerprint. In California, with getting rid of lead and gasoline, we've reduced the amount of lead we have. And so when lead shows up, that is one of the tracers that we say, this could be from elsewhere. And we can trace it back in time and say, 4 days ago, this air was over Asia. So let's look at this first. This is amazing. How long has she been doing this? The hit rate's really high. We look at what are called aerosol particles, little microscopic bits of dust and soot that float around in our atmosphere. And then we've been using them to understanding how they affect our climate and how they affect the clouds and the weather. And you have more pollution and you have more aerosols. Those go into the cloud, and you have so many, they can't get big enough to fall and lead to rain. And it's giving you these extremes of either not enough water in some places and way too much water in other places. What happens if we push it too far? We'll start to see more of these extreme events, things like flooding and hurricanes. These are what people often refer to as tipping points, and that's what we're very concerned about happening. I think people take for granted that the world will always be here for us. It's ours, and so we can just use it up. I'd like to leave something for my kids and their kids to be able to enjoy, and I just see it slipping away. We're responsible for taking care of this planet, and we need to realize that each individual is responsible, and every choice we make every day.
My attachment to my devices is more complicated now. It's hard to get excited about the next new model or upgrade, knowing what they really cost to make. The industry, in its constant search for cheaper workers and land, is moving on to new countries with few government safeguards or inspections. We all have a share in this problem, but we can use our voices and our buying power to demand real labor safety and greater environmental protections. The digital revolution has improved our lives in so many ways. We need to make sure it doesn't rob us of our health and our planet.
So we set a fire. Before we move
feel like you as a consumer have anything you can do about this?
I think consuming not too often helps.
I would upgrade less often. I would absolutely do that.
I can put together a petition to these companies and ask them to be more responsible in their work practices.
Would you be interested in buying a green phone?
Oh, a green device would be great.
I would pay actually more for a green device.
Definitely, I'd pay for a green phone.
I would pay more for it. We already pay more for stuff that we consider organic or ethical. We already do.